The scent of pine needles and wood smoke filled the great hall, mingling with the heady aroma of mulled wine that warmed my hands through the ceramic mug. Laughter echoed off the stone walls, bouncing between wooden beams darkened by decades of hearth fires. I pressed myself further into the shadowed corner, hoping the celebrations would continue to flow around me like water around a stone. Forgotten. Invisible. The Winter Solstice Festival was the most anticipated gathering of the year. Every pack from across the Northern Territories sent representatives to pay homage to King Dominic Ravencroft, the Alpha who had united the warring packs after centuries of bloodshed. The hall buzzed with excitement. Bodies adorned in their finest clothing, voices rising and falling in animated conversation. I watched as Sophia, our pack's most beautiful wolf, tossed her head back in laughter at something one of the royal guards said. Her confidence radiated like heat from the massive fireplace. Everyone loved Sophia. She was everything a female wolf should be. Strong, vivacious, outspoken. Everything I was not. My fingers instinctively reached for the small silver pendant hidden beneath my dress. It had belonged to my mother, the only thing I had left of her. The delicate crescent moon design had worn smooth from years of anxious touching, a ritual that brought me comfort when the world felt too loud, too overwhelming. "Your voice is your power," she'd whispered to me the night before she died. "Never let anyone steal it from you." But they had stolen it anyway, or rather, I had given it away willingly after that terrible day 12 years ago when I'd learned the cost of being heard. "Eleanor, there you are." My body tensed at the sound of my name. Rebecca, the beta female of our pack, wove through the crowd toward me, her emerald dress shimmering under the torchlight. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why are you hiding back here? Come join us." Her words were friendly, but her tone carried that familiar edge of command. Rebecca had always seen me as a project, a broken thing to be fixed. "I'm fine here," I whispered, my voice so faint it barely disturbed the air between us. Speaking above a whisper had become nearly impossible for me, the muscles in my throat constricting painfully whenever I tried. Rebecca sighed, disappointment etching across her features. "Eleanor, you can't spend another festival lurking in corners. You're 25, for goddess's sake. If you ever want to find a mate..." "I don't." The words came out sharper than I intended. A flash of anger crossed her face, quickly masked by a brittle smile. "Well, at least come sit with the rest of the pack. Alpha Marcus noticed your absence." My heart sank. Our pack Alpha rarely noticed anything about me, which was precisely how I preferred it. Being noticed never led to anything good. As Rebecca guided me through the crowd, I could feel eyes sliding over me, then away, dismissing me as unimportant. My pale blonde hair hung like a curtain around my face, and I kept my eyes fixed on the stone floor. The pendant pressed against my skin, a small comfort against the tide of anxiety rising within me. We reached the long table where the rest of our pack sat. Alpha Marcus nodded briefly in acknowledgement, before returning to his conversation with a neighboring pack leader. I slipped into an empty seat beside Lily, the only person in our pack who might be considered my friend. "You okay?" she murmured, sliding a plate of food toward me. I nodded, grateful for her quiet understanding. The festivities grew louder as the night progressed. Servants brought out more wine, and musicians played traditional solstice songs. Some wolves began dancing in the cleared space at the center of the hall. Through it all, I remained silent, observing the intricate dance of pack politics playing out around me. Then a hush fell over the crowd. The massive doors at the end of the hall swung open, and King Dominic entered. I had seen him only once before, from a distance during last year's festival, but even then, his presence had been undeniable. An aura of power that commanded respect and submission. Up close, he was terrifying. The Alpha King stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a warrior. His black hair was cropped short at the sides but longer on top, and his jawline could have been carved from granite, but it was his eyes that held me transfixed. A startling silver gray that seemed to see through pretense and facade, straight to the truth beneath. He moved through the hall like a predator, graceful and lethal. Wolves bowed their heads as he passed, a gesture of respect and submission. I lowered my gaze quickly when he approached our table, heart hammering against my ribs. "Alpha Marcus," The king's voice rolled through the hall, deep and commanding. Your pack honors us with your presence. The formalities continued, but I barely registered the words. I was too focused on controlling my breathing, on making myself smaller, less noticeable. But then I felt it. A weight. A pressure that had nothing to do with physical touch. I glanced up and found the Alpha King's silver eyes fixed directly on me. Time seemed to stop. His gaze narrowed slightly, head tilting almost imperceptibly. I couldn't look away, couldn't breathe. It felt as though he was peeling back layers of my soul, reading secrets I'd buried so deeply I'd forgotten them myself. Then Rebecca's voice shattered the moment. Your Majesty, please allow me to introduce our pack members. As she recited names, I gradually regained control of my racing heart. When she reached me, her voice took on that slightly apologetic tone I knew too well. And this is Eleanor Blake, Your Majesty. I forced myself to raise my eyes again, to offer the smallest nod of acknowledgement. The silent one, he said, not a question, but a statement. Rebecca laughed nervously. Eleanor is quiet, yes. The way he looked at me made me wonder if he somehow knew I hadn't always been this way, that once I had sung and laughed like the others. After what felt like an eternity, he moved on. Continuing his circuit of the hall, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That was strange, Lily whispered beside me. Before I could respond, a loud voice cut through the ambient noise. Let's have some entertainment. It was Damon, the Alpha's son and future leader of our pack. He stood near the musicians, clearly already deep in his cups. His eyes, malicious and bright, scanned the crowd until they landed on me. My blood turned to ice. I have an excellent idea, he continued, his smile cruel and calculating. Let's have some of the unmated females sing for our guests. After all, a beautiful voice can be just as attractive as a beautiful face. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Several young women moved forward eagerly, seeking the attention that might win them a powerful mate. Eleanor, Damon called out, why don't you start? The hall fell silent. Everyone in our pack knew I didn't speak above a whisper, let alone sing. I hadn't sung a note since that day by the river 12 years ago, when my voice had caught the attention of hunters from a rival pack. I shook my head, panic clawing at my throat. Come now, Damon pressed, enjoying my discomfort. Don't be shy. Alpha Marcus frowned at his son but said nothing to stop him. Rebecca looked uncomfortable but remained silent as well. I can't, I whispered. But the words were too soft to carry beyond Lily. What's that? Damon cupped his ear theatrically. We can't hear you, Eleanor. Shame burned through me as wolves began to snicker. This was Damon's revenge for my rejection of his advances last month. A public humiliation. Leave her alone, Lily said, but her voice lacked the authority to challenge the Alpha's son. It's a simple request, Damon insisted, moving toward me. One song. Unless, of course, you're defying a direct request from your future Alpha. The trap was perfectly laid. To refuse would be insubordination. To comply was impossible. I felt a heavy gaze, and looked up to find the Alpha King watching the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. Damon reached our table and extended his hand. Come, Eleanor. One song for our honored guests. My mother's pendant burned against my skin as I reluctantly stood. My legs felt leaden as Damon guided me to the center of the hall. Faces blurred around me, some curious, some pitying, some eagerly anticipating my failure. The musicians looked to me expectantly. She doesn't need accompaniment, Damon announced. Eleanor's voice is so lovely, it stands alone. The mockery in his tone was unmistakable. I stood frozen, panic rising like floodwater. 12 years of silence pressed down on me. I couldn't remember how to form notes, how to project sound. The memory of blood and screams filled my mind, the consequences of the last time I'd let my voice soar. We're waiting, Eleanor, Damon prompted, his voice hardened with command. I closed my eyes, fingers finding the pendant beneath my dress. Your voice is your power, my mother had said, but she'd been wrong. My voice had brought only destruction. Still, I had no choice. To disobey would mean exile. I took a deep breath and parted my lips. At first, nothing came. Then, a whisper of sound, so faint it was barely audible. The wolves closest to me leaned forward, straining to hear. Damon's smirk widened. He had achieved his goal of humiliating me. But then, something shifted inside me. Perhaps it was rage at Damon's cruelty. Or perhaps it was 12 years of silence demanding release. The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin. Warm and encouraging, I thought of the old lullaby my mother used to sing, the one about the moon guiding lost travelers home. The melody rose in my mind, clear as spring water. And suddenly my voice broke free. The first note hung in the air, pure and crystalline. Surprise flickered across Damon's face. I took another breath and continued, each note stronger than the last. The lullaby flowed from me like a river breaking through ice after a long winter. The hall fell utterly silent except for my voice, which filled every corner, bounced off stone walls, and seemed to make the very air shimmer. I kept my eyes closed, afraid to see the reactions, focusing only on the song that poured from my soul after years of captivity. When I finally opened my eyes as the last note faded, I found every face in the hall turned toward me in shock, but one gaze burned more intensely than all the others combined. The Alpha King stood completely still, his silver eyes fixed on me with an expression of stunned wonder. Something fierce and hungry awakened in those eyes as they held mine. And in that moment, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The silence that followed my song was absolute. For one terrifying moment, the world held its breath, and so did I. The pendant at my throat seemed to pulse with warmth, as though awakened by the sound of my voice after so many years of dormancy. Damon's face had transformed from cruel amusement to stunned disbelief. His plan to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly, but it was not his reaction that held me frozen in place. It was the unwavering stare of the Alpha King. King Dominic hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. His silver eyes reflected the torchlight like twin moons, and within them burned something ancient and primal. I couldn't name the emotion I saw there, but it sent shivers cascading down my spine. The spell broke when someone, I never saw who, began to applaud. Others joined until the hall resounded with thunderous approval. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through autumn leaves. Where did that come from? Did you know she could sing like that? Is she a siren? My cheeks burned with embarrassment and fear. I had not meant to reveal this part of myself. Had spent over a decade ensuring no one would ever hear my true voice. The power in it had brought death once before. What would it bring now? Eleanor? Lily appeared at my side, her eyes wide with concern. Are you all right? I nodded mechanically, desperate to retreat back to my corner, to disappear into the shadows once more, but the attention of the hall remained fixed upon me like a physical weight. Return to your seat, Damon ordered, his voice tight with anger. The public humiliation he'd planned for me had become his own instead. As I moved to obey, relieved at the chance to escape, a deep voice cut through the murmurs. Wait. The word was quiet, yet it silenced the entire hall. The Alpha King stepped forward, his movements fluid and deliberate. The crowd parted before him like water. My heart hammered against my ribs as he approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Power rolled off him in waves that I could almost see. A shimmering aura of dominance that made my knees weak. I lowered my eyes instinctively, a submissive gesture ingrained since childhood. Look at me, he commanded softly. I hesitated, then slowly raised my gaze to meet his. Something flickered across his face. A momentary softening, perhaps, or simple curiosity. I couldn't interpret the micro-expressions that played across his features. What is your name? He asked, though I was certain he remembered from the introductions earlier. Eleanor, I whispered, my voice once again reduced to its habitual softness after the strain of singing. Eleanor Blake, he repeated, as though tasting the syllables. That song. What was it? A lullaby, I managed to say. My mother used to sing it. He nodded thoughtfully. It's very old. I haven't heard it performed in a very long time. There was something strange in his voice, a note of recognition or remembrance. His next words shocked everyone in the hall, myself included. You will sit at the high table tonight, Eleanor Blake. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The high table was reserved for alphas and their chosen representatives, never for someone of my low status within the pack hierarchy. Your Majesty, Alpha Marcus interjected smoothly, stepping forward. While Eleanor's voice is certainly unexpected, she is but a common pack member with no special standing. The Alpha King's gaze never left my face as he replied, "Is that so? Then perhaps your pack has failed to recognize value when it stands before them." His words were mild, but the rebuke beneath them was clear. Alpha Marcus's face hardened, but he dared not challenge the king. Before I fully understood what was happening, I found myself being escorted to the high table, feeling the burning stares of everyone in the hall boring into my back. The pendant beneath my dress seemed heavier than before, like a stone pulling me beneath turbulent waters. The feast resumed, but nothing was the same. Sitting at the king's right hand, I picked at my food, too nervous to eat. Occasionally I would glance up to find him studying me with that same unreadable expression. When our eyes met, he didn't look away, didn't pretend he hadn't been watching. The directness of his gaze made me feel flayed open, exposed. "You don't speak much," he observed during a lull in his conversations with the other alphas. "No, Your Majesty," I replied softly. "Yet you sing as though your voice was crafted from starlight." The poetic turn of phrase surprised me coming from the warrior king. Why hide such a gift? I stared down at my plate, uncertain how to answer. The truth was too painful, too dangerous to share, especially with him. "Sometimes," I finally whispered, "gifts come with prices too high to pay." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What price did your voice cost you?" Eleanor Blake. The memory flashed through my mind unbidden. Blood on riverbed stones, screams echoing through the forest. My mother's pendant clutched in my small hand as I ran and ran and ran. I shuddered visibly. "Forgive me," he said, his tone gentler than I'd heard it all evening. "I didn't mean to cause you distress." I nodded my acknowledgement, grateful he didn't press further. As the evening progressed, I became increasingly aware of the hostile glances from members of my own pack. Rebecca's face was tight with barely concealed anger. Damon glowered openly, his humiliation transformed to rage. Even Alpha Marcus seemed displeased by the attention the king showed me. Only Lily offered a supportive smile whenever our eyes met across the hall. When the formal feast concluded, musicians began to play again, and wolves paired off for dancing. I tensed, hoping to be forgotten in the renewed festivities. "Would you honor me with a dance, Eleanor?" The king's request, for his tone was too gentle to be a command, sent panic coursing through me. Dancing with the Alpha King would only increase the target already forming on my back. "I don't dance well, Your Majesty," I said truthfully. A slight smile curved his lips, softening his stern features momentarily. "Neither do I, if I'm being honest. But protocol demands I dance at least once during these gatherings." He stood and extended his hand to me. "We can be awkward together." There was no refusing him. I placed my trembling hand in his and allowed him to lead me to the center of the hall. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, the hand of a warrior, not a pampered ruler. His touch sent strange tingles up my arm, as though some dormant magic had awakened at the contact. The musicians began a slow, formal dance. King Dominic placed his hand at my waist, maintaining a respectful distance between our bodies. Still, I was acutely aware of his physical presence. The warmth radiating from him, the faint scent of cedar and smoke that clung to his skin, the controlled strength in the hand that held mine. "Your pack," he said quietly as we moved through the steps of the dance. "They fear you." The observation startled me. "No, Your Majesty. They pity me perhaps, or find me strange, but they don't fear me." His silver eyes studied my face intently. "I've ruled long enough to recognize fear when I see it. Your alpha, his son, the beta female, they all watch you with fear barely disguised as contempt. Why would they fear someone who barely speaks above a whisper?" I had no answer to give him that wouldn't reveal too much. "Unless," he continued thoughtfully, "they've glimpsed what I heard tonight. The power in your voice." My step faltered, but his strong hand steadied me. "It's just singing," I whispered, the lie bitter on my tongue. "No," he said with absolute certainty. "It's much more than that." The music ended, but he didn't immediately release me. Instead, he leaned slightly closer and said, "Meet me in the East Garden in 1 hour." It wasn't a request, It was a royal command. He stepped back, bowed formally, and returned me to my seat before moving to dance with other high-ranking females, as protocol demanded. I sat frozen, his words echoing in my mind. Meet me in the East Garden in 1 hour? I couldn't. I shouldn't. To be alone with the Alpha King was dangerous enough, but after what had happened tonight, it could be deadly. If he discovered the truth about my voice, about what had happened all those years ago, there would be no corner of his kingdom where I could hide. Yet refusing him wasn't an option either. As I debated my impossible choices, Lily appeared beside me, her expression worried. "What did he say to you?" she whispered. "Everyone's talking. Nothing important," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just pleasantries." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she squeezed my hand supportively. "Be careful, Ellie," she murmured. "I've never seen Damon so angry. Or Rebecca, for that matter." I glanced across the hall, to where Damon stood with a group of young warriors from our pack. His eyes met mine, and the hatred in them made me flinch. He raised his wine glass in a mocking toast before deliberately turning his back on me. The message was clear. I would pay for tonight's humiliation. Rebecca was more subtle in her displeasure. She circulated through the hall, stopping to speak with various influential wolves. Occasionally, she would glance in my direction, her smile tight and false. She was doing damage control, I realized. Probably explaining away my unusual singing as some fluke, ensuring no one took too much interest in the quiet girl with the remarkable voice. Only Alpha Marcus seemed unconcerned. He was deep in conversation with leaders from other packs, politics and alliances being formed and strengthened over wine and music. I was beneath his notice, or so I hoped. As the hour approached, anxiety clawed at my throat. I should return to my assigned chamber and feign illness. I should find some excuse, any excuse, not to meet the Alpha King alone in the garden. But some inexplicable pull, curiosity perhaps, or something deeper and more primal, had me rising from my seat and slipping quietly toward the eastern doors. No one paid me much attention. The festivities were in full swing now, inhibitions lowered by wine and music. The East Garden was famous throughout the kingdom for its beauty, even in winter. Snow dusted the carefully pruned bushes, and lanterns hung from bare tree branches, casting a soft golden glow over winding paths and stone benches. The air was crisp and cold, a welcome relief after the hot, crowded hall. I followed the main path, my footsteps crunching softly on the frozen gravel. The night was clear. Stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. The moon hung low and full, bathing everything in silver light that reminded me of the Alpha King's penetrating gaze. I found him standing beside a frozen fountain, his back to me, looking up at the stars. He had discarded his formal jacket, wearing only a simple white shirt that gleamed in the moonlight. Without the trappings of royalty, he looked almost approachable. Almost, but not quite. Even in this relaxed pose, power emanated from him like heat from a flame. "You came," he said without turning. His voice betrayed no surprise, as though he'd never doubted I would obey. "You commanded, Your Majesty," I replied softly. Now he did turn, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Did I?" I thought I merely suggested. I remained silent, uncertain how to respond to this hint of playfulness from the fearsome Alpha King. He gestured to a stone bench beside the fountain. "Sit with me, Eleanor Blake." I hesitated, but only for a moment before crossing to the bench. The stone was cold beneath me, even through the layers of my dress. King Dominic sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, but not so close as to be improper. For several minutes, we sat in silence. The garden was quiet except for the occasional distant burst of laughter from the great hall and the soft whisper of wind through bare branches. I kept my eyes fixed on my hands folded in my lap, acutely aware of his presence beside me. "You're afraid?" he finally said, his voice gentler than I had ever heard it. "Yes," I admitted, seeing no point in denial. "Of me?" I considered the question carefully. "Not exactly," I answered truthfully. "More of what you represent." He turned slightly toward me, one eyebrow raised in curiosity. "And what do I represent, Eleanor Blake?" "Power," I whispered. "Attention. Visibility." I swallowed hard. "Danger." He was silent for a moment, considering my words. "You've spent a long time hiding, haven't you?" It wasn't really a question. "Keeping yourself small." "Unremarkable. Until tonight." I nodded, my fingers instinctively finding the pendant beneath my dress. "What happened 12 years ago?" he asked abruptly. My head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "How did you—" "Your alpha mentioned you've been silent for 12 years. Not mute, but choosing silence." His silver eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight. "Something happened. Something that taught you to fear your own voice." The memory rose unbidden, sunshine dappling through leaves, the cool rush of river water over my feet, my childish voice rising in song as I played alone at the water's edge. Then, strange men emerging from the trees, their eyes gleaming with greed and something darker. My mother's frantic arrival, her desperate fight to protect me, the blood spreading across her chest from the hunter's knife. And through it all, my voice continuing to sing, unable to stop, watching in horror as my song seemed to drive the men into a frenzy of violence and desire. "Eleanor." The king's voice pulled me back to the present. His hand hovered near mine, not quite touching. "Breathe." I hadn't realized I was hyperventilating. With effort, I slowed my breathing, focusing on the cold air filling my lungs, the solid stone beneath me. "I don't wish to cause you pain," he said quietly, "but I need to understand what I heard tonight." "It was just a song," I insisted weakly. He shook his head. "No. It was magic." His eyes held mine, demanding truth. Old magic. The kind that's been lost to our kind for generations. I remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. "Your voice," he continued. "It resonated with something inside me, something I didn't know was there until I heard you sing." His brow furrowed slightly. "It was as though your voice reached past flesh and bone, past reason and thought, to touch something essential within me." Fear coursed through me at his words. This was exactly what I had dreaded, exactly why I had kept silent for so long. My voice affected wolves in ways I couldn't control, ways that could lead to violence and death. "You should stay away from me," I whispered urgently. "My voice it's not safe." To my surprise, he laughed softly. "I've faced down rival kings, assassins, and feral wolf packs. I think I can handle one small female with an unusual voice." "You don't understand. Desperation made me bold. People have died because of what my voice does to wolves. It changes them somehow, makes them violent, unpredictable." His expression sobered. "Is that what happened 12 years ago?" I nodded, throat tight with unshed tears. "Hunters from a rival pack. They heard me singing at the river. Something about my voice drew them to me. Made them—" I couldn't continue. "Made them lose control," he finished for me. "My mother tried to protect me. They killed her." The admission felt like a shard of glass in my throat. And it was my fault. My voice did something to them. King Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had changed, become more formal, more distant. "There are stories, ancient legends about females with voices that could command wolves. Sirens, they were called. Most believe they were just myths, but the oldest wolf bloodlines know better." My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, Eleanor Blake, that you possess an ability thought lost to our kind for centuries." His eyes gleamed with something I couldn't identify. "A gift that could be either tremendously valuable or incredibly dangerous, depending on how it's used. And by whom?" A chill that had nothing to do with the winter night ran through me. "I don't want it. I never asked for this. Few who possess great power ever do," he replied, his voice softening slightly. "The question is not whether you want it, but whether you will learn to control it, or continue to let it control you." "I've controlled it by not using it," I said, an edge of defiance creeping into my whisper. He shook his head. "That's not control, that's suppression. And suppressed power always finds a way to break free, often in the worst possible moment." As if to illustrate his point, a commotion erupted at the garden entrance. We both turned to see Damon striding down the path toward us, his face contorted with rage, Rebecca and 2 other wolves from our pack following close behind. King Dominic rose smoothly to his feet, his relaxed demeanor instantly replaced by regal authority. I scrambled up beside him, instinctively moving slightly behind his larger frame. "This is a private conversation," the king said, his voice deceptively calm. Damon halted a few paces away, swaying slightly from too much wine. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty," he said with a mocking bow, "but we've come to collect our pack member. She's unwell and should return to her chambers." "She seems perfectly well to me," King Dominic replied coolly. "With all due respect," Rebecca interjected, her tone suggesting very little respect at all, "Eleanor has a history of mental instability. The excitement of the evening has clearly overwhelmed her." I flinched at the blatant lie. This was their strategy then: paint me as unstable, discredit anything I might say or do. "Mental instability," the king repeated, his tone dangerously soft. "How curious that this is the first I've heard of such a condition." "It's a private pack matter," Damon said, his eyes flicking to me with undisguised hatred. "We've managed it discreetly for years." "How considerate of you," King Dominic remarked, sarcasm evident in every syllable. I could feel the tension building between them. Thick and dangerous as storm clouds before lightning strikes, this confrontation was escalating too quickly, and I feared where it might lead. "Your Majesty," I said softly, touching his arm lightly to draw his attention. "Perhaps it would be best if I did retire for the evening." He looked down at me, surprise and something like disappointment flickering across his features. "Is that what you want, Eleanor?" It wasn't. What I wanted was to stay here in the moonlit garden with him, to unravel the mystery of my voice, to understand the strange connection I'd felt when our eyes first met. But I also knew that openly defying Damon and Rebecca would have consequences I might not be prepared to face. Before I could answer, Damon took another step forward, emboldened by wine and jealousy. "The girl doesn't know what she wants," he sneered. "She's never had the spine to make her own choices." Something dangerous flashed in the king's eyes. "You forget yourself," he said, each word clipped and precise. "You address a female under my protection, in my presence." The declaration sent shockwaves through our small gathering. Being under the Alpha King's protection was no small thing. It meant any offense against me would be considered an offense against him directly. Damon paled slightly, finally seeming to realize the dangerous ground he tread upon. But Rebecca, ever the strategist, stepped forward smoothly. "Your Majesty is too kind to take an interest in Eleanor's welfare," she said, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "But surely you have more important matters to attend to than one damaged pack member. We would hate to impose on your valuable time." King Dominic's smile was cold enough to freeze the blood in my veins. "I decide what is worthy of my time, Beta Rebecca, not you." Rebecca's mask of solicitude slipped momentarily, revealing the calculation beneath. "Of course, Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect." An uncomfortable silence fell over the garden. I stood frozen between these powerful wolves, feeling like a rabbit caught in a snare. The pendant at my throat seemed to burn against my skin, a physical reminder of my mother's final warning. "Your voice is your power, but what good was power if it only brought destruction?" Finally, King Dominic turned to me. "The choice is yours, Eleanor. Return to your chambers with your pack members, or remain here with me." It wasn't truly a choice. To stay would mean declaring open opposition to my pack leadership, something that could result in exile or worse once the festival ended and the Alpha King's attention turned elsewhere. Yet the thought of surrendering to Damon and Rebecca's manipulations made my skin crawl. I looked up at King Dominic, struck again by the intensity of his silver gaze. "I should go," I whispered, hoping he would understand what I couldn't say aloud. That this wasn't surrender, but strategic retreat. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, or frustration. But he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "As you wish." Relief spread across Damon's face, quickly masked by a smug smile. "Come along then, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with false solicitude. "Let's get you to bed." I moved to join my pack members, each step feeling like a betrayal of something I couldn't quite name. As I passed the king, his hand caught mine briefly, the touch sending sparks racing up my arm. "This isn't over," he murmured, so quietly that only I could hear. "We will speak again." The promise, or was it a warning, followed me as Damon and Rebecca escorted me back into the castle, their grips on my arms just a fraction too tight to be supportive. The other 2 pack members, both loyal to Damon, followed closely behind, effectively trapping me between them. Once we were out of earshot of the garden, Rebecca's caring facade evaporated. "What did you tell him?" she hissed, fingers digging painfully into my arm. "Nothing," I whispered truthfully. "We barely spoke." "Liar," Damon snarled, jerking me roughly as we turned down the corridor leading to the guest chambers. "The Alpha King doesn't spend an hour alone in the gardens with a nobody like you to discuss the weather." "I swear, I didn't tell him anything." "Your voice," Rebecca said, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "He heard you sing. Did he ask about that?" I hesitated too long, and Damon took my silence as confirmation. "I told you we should have dealt with this years ago," he muttered to Rebecca. "If he discovers what she is, he won't," Rebecca interrupted sharply. "Because as far as anyone knows, she's just a disturbed girl who happened to sing prettily once. Nothing more." She fixed me with a hard stare. "Isn't that right, Eleanor?" The threat was unmistakable. I nodded mechanically, desperate to end this confrontation. We reached my chamber, and Damon opened the door, practically shoving me inside. "Stay here until morning," he ordered. "Don't even think about trying to speak to the king again." The door slammed shut behind me, and I heard the distinctive sound of a key turning in the lock. They had actually locked me in, like a prisoner. I sank onto the bed, trembling with reaction. The evening's events swirled through my mind in a chaotic jumble. The forced performance, the shocking revelation of my voice, the Alpha King's penetrating stare, his disturbing words in the garden. Sirens. He had called females like me. A myth, a legend, a monster. I curled into myself, drawing my knees to my chest. What would happen now? If the king truly believed I possessed this ancient power, would he demand I use it? And if he did, could I refuse him? My fingers found the silver pendant, its familiar shape a small comfort in my turmoil. I closed my eyes, remembering my mother's face, wishing desperately that she were here to guide me through this dangerous territory. "Your voice is your power." Her final words to me, spoken as life ebbed from her body. I had interpreted them as a warning, a caution to keep silent to prevent further tragedy. But what if I had misunderstood? What if she had been trying to tell me something else entirely? What if my voice truly was my power? Not a curse to be suppressed, but a gift to be wielded? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. For 12 years I had hidden in the shadows, made myself small and silent, believing it was the only way to keep others safe. What if I had been wrong all this time? A soft scratching at my door interrupted my thoughts. I froze, listening intently. It came again, followed by a whispered, "Ellie, are you awake?" "Lily." I hurried to the door. "They've locked me in," I whispered through the wood. "I know. I saw them." There was a pause, then the sound of metal against metal. "Stand back. I'm going to try to pick the lock." Minutes later, the lock clicked, and the door swung open to reveal Lily, a hairpin still clutched in her hand, and a triumphant smile on her face. "Where did you learn to do that?" I whispered, impressed despite my anxiety. "My brothers were always locking me out of their rooms when we were cubs," she replied with a shrug. "I had to adapt." Her smile faded as she took in my appearance. "Are you all right?" "What happened in the garden?" I pulled her inside and quietly shut the door, afraid someone might hear us talking. "The king. He knows about my voice, Lily, or at least he suspects." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean, knows? There's nothing to know except that you can sing beautifully." I hesitated. Lily was my closest friend, but I had never shared the full truth with her, or anyone, about what happened that day at the river, about what my voice could do. "There's more to it than that," I admitted softly. "My voice. It affects wolves, changes them somehow." Understanding dawned on her face. "The hunters who killed your mother," she whispered. "That's why you stopped speaking." I nodded, relief flooding through me at finally sharing even this small part of my burden. "The king called me a siren, said it's some kind of ancient wolf magic." Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, looking stunned. "Sirens are just old tales," she said, but doubt tinged her voice. "Stories to frighten cubs. Apparently not." I joined her on the bed, twisting my pendant between my fingers. "And now Damon and Rebecca are terrified he'll discover what I can do. That's why they locked me in here. But why would they care? Wouldn't having someone with a rare ability bring status to our pack?" I shook my head. "You don't understand. They've always known, or at least suspected. That's why they've kept me isolated all these years. Why they spread rumors about me being mentally unstable." The pieces had been falling into place as I spoke. "They're afraid of me, Lily, of what my voice might do if I ever learned to control it. But that's—" A sudden commotion in the hallway cut her off. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by raised voices. We exchanged alarmed glances. "Hide!" I hissed, pushing her toward the wardrobe. She had barely closed the door behind her when my chamber door burst open. Damon stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage, two of his most loyal warriors flanking him. Behind them, I glimpsed other wolves from our pack hurriedly packing belongings. "What's happening?" I asked, rising to my feet. "We're leaving," Damon spat, striding into the room. "Now, the festival be damned." "I don't understand. The Alpha King has requested a private audience with you tomorrow morning," he said, grabbing my arm roughly. "Alpha Marcus thinks it's best we depart before that happens." Cold fear slithered down my spine. "But that would be a direct insult to the king. He could—" "We'll deal with the consequences later," Damon interrupted. "Right now, we need to get you away from here." I tried to pull my arm free, but his grip only tightened painfully. "You can't just drag me away against my will." His laugh was ugly. "Watch me. Your precious Alpha King is currently occupied with an emergency council meeting. By the time he realizes you're gone, we'll be halfway to the border." Panic rose within me. They weren't just trying to isolate me anymore. They were kidnapping me, planning to spirit me away to some remote location where the king couldn't find me, where no one could find me. "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I won't go." Damon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You don't have a choice, Eleanor. We know what you are now, what you can do. Did you really think we'd let the Alpha King take control of a weapon like you?" "A weapon?" I echoed, genuinely confused. "Don't play innocent," he snarled. "Your voice could control an entire army of wolves if properly used. Our pack has kept your secret for 12 years, contained the threat you pose. We won't let you fall into the hands of a power-hungry king who would use you to tighten his grip over the territories." The accusation stunned me. King Dominic had called my voice a gift. But was Damon right? Was that how the king saw me, as a weapon to be wielded against his enemies? While I hesitated, frozen by doubt, Damon nodded to one of his warriors. The man stepped forward with a strip of cloth. "A precaution," Damon said with mock gentleness. "Can't have you singing for help along the way, can we?" Reality crashed down on me with brutal clarity. Once they gagged me and took me from the castle, I would be completely at their mercy, and based on the hatred gleaming in Damon's eyes, mercy was not something I could count on. My hand flew to my throat, to the pendant hidden beneath my dress. "Your voice is your power," my mother's last words echoed in my mind, taking on new significance. Not a warning, but a reminder, an encouragement. "I won't let you do this," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. Damon laughed. "And how exactly do you plan to stop us?" I took a deep breath, centering myself. I had no plan, no strategy, only instinct and desperate courage. And my voice. Before they could move to gag me, I began to sing. It wasn't the gentle lullaby I had performed earlier. This was a different kind of song, one that rose from some primal place within me I hadn't known existed. The melody was ancient, the words in a language I didn't recognize yet somehow knew by heart. It poured from me like water breaking through a dam, powerful and unstoppable. The effect was immediate. Damon and his warriors froze, their eyes widening in shock, then glazing over as the song took hold. I felt something strange happening, a connection forming between us, thin strands of energy that allowed me to sense their emotions, their thoughts, their wills. "Step back," I sang into the melody, focusing my intent into the command. To my amazement, they obeyed instantly, moving away from me in perfect synchronization. "You will not touch me," I continued, weaving the command into the ancient song. "You will not harm me. You will leave this room and forget you planned to take me away." Confusion flickered across Damon's face, his will battling against my influence. "No," he growled, fighting the compulsion. "I won't let you." I strengthened the melody, pouring more of myself into it. "You will leave this room," I repeated, my voice ringing with power I was only beginning to understand. "Now." As if pulled by invisible strings, the three men turned and walked stiffly from my chamber. I continued singing until I heard their footsteps fade down the corridor, then collapsed onto the bed, trembling with exhaustion and shock. The wardrobe door creaked open and Lily emerged, her face pale with awe and fear. "Ellie," she whispered, "what was that?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hoarse from the strain of the strange song. "I've never done that before, never even tried." She approached cautiously, as if afraid I might start singing again. "You controlled them, made them obey you." The reality of what I'd just done hit me with full force. I had reached into the minds of 3 grown wolves and bent their wills to mine. The power was terrifying and intoxicating. "They'll be back," Lily said urgently. "Once whatever you did wears off, and they'll bring others." She was right. I had bought myself a temporary reprieve. Nothing more. Damon would return, probably with Alpha Marcus this time, and they would make sure I couldn't use my voice against them again. "You need to go to the king," Lily continued, gripping my hands. "Right now." "Tell him everything. What if Damon is right?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if the king only wants to use me as a weapon?" Lily's expression softened. "I saw the way he looked at you during your song, Ellie. That wasn't a man calculating the strategic value of a weapon. That was something else entirely." Hope fluttered weakly in my chest. "Even if you're right, how do I reach him?" Damon said there's an emergency council meeting. "I'll create a distraction," Lily said, a determined gleam in her eye. "Get you safely to the king's chambers. He'll be back there eventually." "Lily, if they catch you helping me—" "They won't," she interrupted with confidence. "Now come on. We don't have much time." The corridors were eerily quiet as we slipped through the sleeping castle. Most wolves had retired after the festivities, and the few guards we encountered were easily avoided with Lily's guidance. She seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of the castle's layout. "How do you know where we're going?" I whispered as she led me up a narrow spiral staircase. "I may have charmed one of the royal guards into giving me a tour earlier," she replied with a mischievous grin. "The private royal wing is this way." We emerged into a sumptuously appointed corridor. Thick carpets muffled our footsteps, and ornate tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles adorned the walls. At the end of the hallway stood a pair of massive wooden doors, intricately carved with the royal crest. "The king's chambers," Lily whispered. "This is as far as I go." Panic seized me. "You're leaving me?" "I need to create that distraction, remember?" She squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Wait inside. The king will return eventually." Before I could protest further, she darted back down the staircase, leaving me alone in the silent corridor. For a long moment, I stood frozen with indecision. To enter the Alpha King's private chambers uninvited was unthinkable, yet to remain in the corridor risked discovery by passing guards. Drawing a deep breath, I approached the imposing doors. To my surprise, they opened easily at my touch, swinging inward without a sound. I slipped inside and closed them behind me, heart pounding painfully against my ribs. The king's outer chamber was larger than my entire family home had been. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its embers casting a warm glow over comfortable furnishings. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with ancient tomes and scrolls. It was both regal and surprisingly personal, reflecting a man of both power and intellect. I moved further into the room, drawn to a small table near the fire where several books lay open. One contained illustrations of wolves with human-like features, singing to enraptured audiences, sirens. My fingers traced the ancient drawings, a strange recognition stirring within me. Curious about your heritage, I whirled around, a startled gasp escaping me. King Dominic stood in an inner doorway, his formal attire discarded in favor of a simple white shirt and dark trousers. Despite the casual clothing, his presence filled the room with undeniable authority. "Forgive me," I stammered, suddenly acutely aware of the impropriety of my presence in his chambers. "I shouldn't be here, and yet, here you are." He moved into the room with fluid grace, studying me with those penetrating silver eyes. "Why?" The words tumbled out in a rush. "My pack is trying to take me away. Damon came to my room with warriors. They were going to gag me and smuggle me out of the castle before our scheduled audience tomorrow." His expression darkened. "Did they harm you?" "No, I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. I stopped them." Understanding flickered across his features. "With your voice?" I nodded, watching his reaction carefully. To my surprise, a small smile curved his lips. "So you've begun to embrace your gift, rather than fear it." "I didn't know I could do that," I admitted. "Make them obey me. It just happened." He moved to the table, closing the book I had been examining. "The ability manifests differently in each siren. Some can only entrance with beauty or emotion. Others, the most powerful, can command absolute obedience." His eyes met mine. "The fact that you commanded 3 grown males without training suggests you may be one of the strongest to emerge in generations." "Damon called me a weapon," I said quietly. "Is that how you see me too?" The king's expression softened unexpectedly. "Is that what you fear? That I want to use your abilities for conquest?" "Don't you?" I challenged, surprising myself with my boldness. He approached slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. "What I want, Eleanor Blake, is to protect you, protect me." "Why?" "Because sirens were hunted to near extinction centuries ago by those who feared their power or coveted it for themselves." His voice gentled. "And because from the moment I heard your song, I knew you were mine to protect." The possessive declaration should have frightened me, but instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through my body. "Yours?" His hand reached out, hesitating just short of touching my face. "May I?" I nodded, unable to speak as his fingers gently brushed my cheek. The contact sent warmth spiraling through me, settling low in my belly. "There is an ancient belief among wolfkind," he said softly, "that the goddess created perfect pairs, 2 souls designed to complete each other. Most wolves live their entire lives without finding their true mate. But when they do," his fingers traced down to the silver pendant at my throat, touching it reverently. "The recognition is instantaneous and undeniable." "Soulmates?" I whispered, the concept familiar from old pack stories told around winter fires. "Yes." His silver eyes held mine, intense and vulnerable at once. "When you sang, Eleanor, your voice called to something deep within me that I didn't even know existed. A place that had been waiting, empty and unknown, until your song filled it." My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's impossible. I'm nobody, just a quiet girl from a minor pack." "You are a siren," he corrected gently, "the first to emerge in generations. And you are my mate, though it may take time for you to accept that truth." The revelation should have seemed absurd, yet something within me recognized the rightness of his words. The strange connection I'd felt from our first meeting, the way his touch sent fire through my veins. It all suddenly made sense. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Now," he said, stepping back slightly to give me space, "you have a choice to make. You can return to your pack, though I warn you they will never allow you to explore your gifts. They fear what they don't understand. Or," I prompted when he paused, "or you can stay here, under my protection. Learn to control your voice, to use your abilities without fear." His expression remained carefully neutral. "The choice must be yours, freely made." The pendant at my throat seemed to warm against my skin, as if responding to his words. "Your voice is your power." Had my mother known somehow? Had she been preparing me for this moment? A sudden commotion erupted outside the chamber doors, shouts and the sound of running feet. Moments later, a guard burst in without knocking, his face flushed with urgency. "Your Majesty." Alpha Marcus and his son are demanding entrance to the castle. They claim one of their pack members has been abducted. The king's face hardened. By whom? By you, sire, the guard replied uncomfortably. They say you've taken their female against pack law. A bitter laugh escaped me, after they tried to kidnap me from my room. King Dominic's eyes narrowed dangerously. Where are they now? In the main courtyard, Your Majesty. With 20 of their warriors. 20 warriors for one small female. The king mused, his tone deceptively calm. One might think they fear her more than they fear me. He turned back to me. It seems your choice must be made sooner than I'd hoped, Eleanor. Your alpha comes to reclaim you, with force, if necessary. Fear and determination warred within me. For 12 years, I had lived in the shadows of my pack, silent and overlooked, believing my voice brought only destruction. Tonight, I had glimpsed a different possibility, a life where my voice was not a curse, but a gift to be cherished and developed. I'll come with you to meet them, I said, straightening my shoulders, but I want to speak to them myself. Surprise flashed across his face. You're certain? I nodded, touching the pendant for courage. My voice is my power, I said softly. It's time I used it. The courtyard was ablaze with torchlight, illuminating the tense standoff between the royal guards and the wolves of my former pack. Alpha Marcus stood at the forefront, Damon and Rebecca flanking him. Their faces registered shock when they saw me enter alongside the king. Eleanor, Alpha Marcus called, his voice carrying across the open space. Come here at once. I felt the weight of the command, the Alpha's authority that had governed my life for years, but something had changed within me. His power no longer held me in thrall. No, I replied, my voice clear and steady. I will not. Murmurs rippled through both groups at my defiance. Alpha Marcus's face darkened with rage. You belong to our pack, he growled. You will obey your alpha. I belong to myself, I replied, feeling strength flow through me with each word spoken aloud. And I choose to stay here. She's bewitched, Damon spat, addressing the gathered wolves, using her unnatural voice to manipulate the king, just as we feared. I stepped forward, away from the king's protective presence, and faced my pack directly. For 12 years you kept me silent. You isolated me, spread rumors about my mental state, made me believe my voice was something to be feared and hidden. My words rang out clearly in the night air. You knew what I was, and instead of helping me understand my gift, you buried it in shame and fear. Rebecca moved forward, her face a mask of false concern. Eleanor, dear, you're confused. We've only ever tried to protect you. Protect me? I laughed bitterly. Or control me. Tonight Damon tried to kidnap me from my room. Is that protection? The king stepped up beside me, his presence both reassuring and powerful. These are serious accusations. Attempting to remove a wolf from royal protection is treason. Alpha Marcus paled slightly. There has been a misunderstanding, Your Majesty. The girl is unstable, prone to delusions. I am a siren, I interrupted, my voice carrying with newfound confidence. The first in generations, and I am staying here to learn how to use my gift properly. You have no authority to make such a decision, Alpha Marcus snarled. You belong to our pack. I felt a strange calm settle over me. No, I said simply, I don't. And then, guided by instinct and newfound confidence, I began to sing. This time, I embraced the power flowing through me, directing it with conscious intent rather than desperate fear. The melody that emerged was beautiful, but commanding, wrapping around the wolves of my former pack like silken bonds. You will return to your territories, I sang, weaving the command into the music. You will leave me here in peace. You will never again try to control or silence me. I watched in amazement as the fight drained from their faces. One by one, they turned away, moving like sleepwalkers back toward their horses and carriages. Only Alpha Marcus resisted momentarily, his face contorting with effort before he too surrendered to the power of my voice. I continued singing until the last of them had departed, then let the melody fade into silence. Exhaustion swept through me, and I swayed slightly where I stood. Strong arms caught me before I could fall. That, King Dominic said with undisguised wonder, was extraordinary. I leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I didn't hurt them, did I? No, he assured me. You simply redirected their priorities. The compulsion will fade in time, though the memory of your power will remain. He gazed down at me, his silver eyes filled with something that looked remarkably like pride. You showed remarkable restraint for one so untrained. What happens now? I asked, suddenly aware of the many eyes watching us from around the courtyard. The king's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. Now, Eleanor Blake, you begin a new chapter. As my honored guest, as a siren in training, he paused, his voice softening. And, if you wish it, as the woman who may one day be my queen. The promise in those words sent a thrill of both terror and exhilaration through me. I thought of the quiet, invisible girl I had been just hours ago, and marveled at how completely life could change in a single night. My hand reached for the pendant at my throat, my mother's final gift. In some way I couldn't explain. I felt her presence with me, her approval warming my heart. Your voice is your power, King Dominic murmured, echoing my thoughts. And what a magnificent power it is. For the first time in 12 years, I allowed myself to smile fully, without reservation or fear. The future stretching before me was uncertain, filled with challenges I could scarcely imagine. Learning to control my abilities, navigating court politics, exploring the connection between the king and myself that had ignited so unexpectedly. But whatever came, I would face it with my voice free and strong, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. I'm ready, I said, and the words rang with quiet certainty in the night air.